All right, so let's take a look at where we left off and continue from there. So the next thing what we're going to be building is, so we built our first section and we put it into our MJML full, and we know what that looks like. Here we have everything. I'm working on this new releases section. So once we finish this, you're going to understand how to put your whole newsletter, your own dynamic newsletter, depending on whatever content you have, whatever design you have, you're going to understand how to put it all together. Because in this video, what we're going to look at is the nested section. So we're going to take this newsletter, and if you've been paying attention, then you realize that this newsletter is actually different than the one we had because we're in a new week. We've actually sent out a newsletter, and this is our latest newsletter now. So we have 4 items instead of the amount that we had before, and the great thing about this is this system works depending on no matter how few or as many dynamic items that we have, this takes care of it. So that is what we're going to take a look at today. So the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to create a variable. And we are dealing with the new releases or new release section. So this is the whole section. And the value, we're going to go back to our code here, just so we can see our code here. There's, it's a pretty simple section. And then we have our insert for adding our columns. But so we've got our title and we've got instructions on how to use it. We have instructions about clicking the image because as we'll see, the image is a link. So we're just going to grab our minified version of this, which is this, and we want to grab all of that. And we're going to copy it over, and that becomes our value. And then we're going to add our inserts into here. But let's just save. So I've created this stop and debug so we can really see what we're doing. And so let's pull our latest newsletter. So let's just run this real quick. And what we are doing is, so we've already kind of grabbed some of the basic information from this. We've pulled right from the newsletter, but what we're doing in this section, in any of these dynamic section with dynamic columns, is we're going to be pulling in by the Webflow ID the item. So we have this, I have this in a database. So if we look at our new releases, and it's always a great habit to get into this anyway, but in your database, add the Webflow ID. In any external database. It makes it very easy for API calls or anything else to have the Webflow ID. You used to have to add a field in Webflow to be able to access it, but now it's readily available with the API call. As you can see here, when we just pulled the item, this is the Webflow item ID for the newsletter itself. And so these are all the Webflow IDs for the items. And so what we're going to do is we're basically going to loop through each of these items to get the particular details for that item, because they already exist in our database. So that is the next step that we're going to be doing. But before we do that, we're going to want to create one thing, and that is we're going to create a wrapper. We're going to create a variable. And we're going to be creating a wrapper, and we're going to call it new release columns. Let's go release columns. Now this wrapper we're going to make empty right now, and it's going to hold all of the columns that we end up creating. So it's going to hold all of our items. But we need to create a variable to put things in before we do any kind of looping. So now that we have that, we're going to create a for each loop. And the items that we're going to loop through is we're going to loop through this new release. So let's go and grab our we have our handy latest newsletter here. We've stopped and debugged. Let's just go to our latest newsletter. Let's subpath it. And fine, and what we want is we are going to go through this list. So this array, which we can see is an array of new releases. We see 4 here. So we're just going to hit this. And so this is what we're going to be looking at, and then we're going to actually save this because I like to be very specific. Item to me isn't specific enough. So this means that these are a new release, if I can spell today. So now we have a for each loop happening for each new release. And so for that, the first thing that we're going to be doing in this is we're going to be getting the record from our new releases. So we have a database already, so I'm going to be getting a record because we just want the single record for this, and so we're going to grab from our new releases, and we are going to go by our Webflow ID. And we're going to take the field value of new release. Because once we have looped through all of this, we're looping through them and we're going to get just this Webflow ID. So that is what's being returned in new release right now. And so that is what we are going to get back. And we're fine. Return as new releases 1 is fine for us. We just want the item. So let's use our stop and debug just to kind of see what this looks like. So now that we have our information from our new release, for each of these, what we're going to do is we are going to add the column itself. So we have this column wrapper that we're going to end up putting everything in, but first we have to create a column for each. So in this for each loop, we're going to create another variable, and we're going to call it new release column, or actually just new release is fine because that's what it is. And then we're going to grab our code. So in our code here, we have our new release column, and we have a source for the image, so a URL for that. We have our alt text. So if you look here at the alt text, because what we're actually wanting the alt text to do is we're not actually describing the image, we're describing where the link goes to. So the alt text is going to have listen to and then whatever the title is on Spotify. So that's where it's sending them to, and then we have the URL for that. We have the title again, the type, the artist name. So we're following that pattern. So we're going to grab this new release column from our minified version of it. And we're going to plop that in our value. And we're just going to save that for now. And then what we're going to do is we're going to apply our replace filter. So let's just grab this, and then we're going to add a replace filter. So the first one we're going to replace is this image. So let's go replace. We want to replace image, and image being the URL. And so we have new releases 1, because that's what our thing is, and then we have our subpath. So this is, we're pulling the item, we're pulling it directly from the item itself. We have this item saved, so now we are grabbing it. So the release image is here, and we want the URL for our release image. update that. That's our first replace. Our second replace is going to be the title. And because we have title in a couple places, anywhere in this document where title appears, it will be replaced. So we're going to replace. And that's the handy thing about replace is it replaces everything within the variable that we're looking at. It will replace all instances of something. So we have the title, and if we do this again, we have new releases 1. We're going to just do our subpath, define this, and here is our title. And we're going to update that. So we have, now we need the URL, and that is going to be the Spotify URL in this case. And again, repetition is always good with this for this particular aspect of things. Define this, and we want the listen link here, which is our Spotify. Then we have if we go back, see how this starts getting condensed again? We can go through this and scroll down, but if we really want to see what we're dealing with and in an easy way, we just go back to our release column. So we've done our image, we've done our URL, we've done our title, we have type, and we have artist name left. So let's just go back, and we have replace. We want to replace the type. Type of the release it is. Let's go back to our new releases subpath. Control V, define, and we have now the image, but we want the release type here. So we're matching that to that. And then the one last filter we have is we have artist name. So we have last replace filter, and we have artist name. Remember, your dynamic data is going to be different than this. This is just a little bit of repetition to really sink in how you get this information. So we've got an artist name, which is here, and we're going to save that. So here, I'm going to put this in front of the stop and debug. You want to make sure it's in your for loop, and now we can just test our data here by changing our stop and debug to new release. And let's see if what happens when we run this. So we get basically our column here, and then we have all of those, all of the dynamic data is here. You can kind of see it a little bit easier in this particular thing, but we have all of our dynamic data. So we know that this is happening, and this will happen for each item. So the other thing that we want to do is, because what we're doing is we're not really creating an array with these, like in JavaScript we might be creating an array, but what we're actually doing is we're just creating a long text, and that's how we're treating this. So because of that, what we're going to use is we're actually going to use a text function. So we're going to update this variable that we had before. which is our new releases, new release columns. And so what we're going to do is we're going to start sticking in these variables inside of them, and we're just going to keep adding them on as a text. So let's just do that real quick and see how that works. So the function we're going to use is text append. And what this does is this takes an existing text and appends it to the variable we have. So the existing variable that we want is that new release columns that we added, and the value that we're going to add is we're going to add our new release. So what's going to end up happening is every time, because we have this in this loop, every time that we get a new variable, new release, it's going to append that text to this new release columns. So it's just going to create this larger text file. So let's take a look and see how that works. So if we take the stop and debug out of the loop now, because we wanted to run the whole loop and see what that looks like. So we're going to, let's take a look at what that, we want to see this new release column. So we're going to stop and debug new release columns. So let's quickly run this stop and debug. And we've got it on our new release columns. So we can see how this all works. So we just get this really long text file that includes all of the columns that we have. So our for each loop has worked. We have our text append. We have our new release columns that now has the total of all of our loops. And the last step that we're going to do is we now need to set that new release columns into our section. So what we're going to do here is we're going to update the variable. And we're going to use our replace again. So the existing variable that we want to update is this new release section. The value that we're going to be using is our new release section. And then we are going to do our replace. Because if you remember, when we go to our new release section, we're going to pop that information into the insert by just using the replace. So text replace is just what we're using over and over and over again, and it is the easiest way to achieve what we want in this case. So we're replacing the insert, and what we're doing is we're going to get the value from that new release columns. So we know we have all of that text from new release columns, and we want to place it into our section. So if we add our section, there we go. Had it in the loop, that's why we were only getting one response back. Add it to the loop again, here we are, and now it's wrapped in our section. And so as we did before, we're going to update our MJML full to add the section into it. So let's just add function. We're going to update our variable, and our variable is the MJML full. And the value we want is MJML full. And we're going to add that replace filter again. And let's take a look at what we are replacing. So if we go back to our MJML full. So we did our intro section, so we called this releases section. So this is what we're going to be replacing. And we're going to replace it with our new release section here. So if we save this, and this time we're going to pull our stop and debug down, and we're going to do this on MJML full. And let's run this again. So now we have our full MJML, and we should have the first and second section. So I've got all of this here. This is all my MJML code. We're going to go back right here. Okay, and what I want to do is I want to pop in our thing here. And as you can see, there we have our initial section, and then we also have our new releases section ready to go in our MJML, and it is working. So by doing these first two sections, this is basically the breakdown of how this whole thing is going to build out. So I'm going to fill in the rest of it, and then we're going to come back and look at how we can use Xano's zip capabilities to zip this all together.